Temtem was released early this month and aims to be a new answer to the monster collecting genre, but this time offering aspects of a cross-platform MMORPG with a huge amount of customization. But does this indie title live up to the biggest franchises of the similar genre? From the start of the game, while I enjoyed the variety of character creation and the available choices, even having the game let me pick my pronouns for the character out of he, she, and they, I immediately noticed the controls were not super intuitive, or at least not as intuitive as other games that I've played. For example, pressing up on the D-pad wouldn't go to the option immediately above it, but would actually go to the previous option. This controls the same when selecting an opponent in battle, and again, not super intuitive and didn't come super quickly to me. And it's still, even now, I've played about 20 hours and I'm still finding it a little bit fiddly to control at some points. Another thing that makes sense, but I was also kind of surprised by, was the fact that the character name has to be completely unique. It's an online game, that makes sense, but each character does have a unique identifying number, which is not the name, so I would have expected it to let me have a different name, but again, it's not super surprising, but I would have preferred if I could have a unique name. It feels weird if everyone just calling people by, I don't know, I saw some really funny names too that probably weren't super appropriate for the game, but anyway. So, I've also noticed that the graphics are nice, and the Temtem characters, and I keep on trying to not call them Pokemon or Digimon, because that just comes naturally whenever I talk about monsters. I'm like, they're Pokemon or they're Digimon. No, these are Temtem. So the graphics are nice and the designs of these characters are nice. However, the humans are mostly lacking expressions and seem to just kind of move their arms around without having any emotions in their face. Like, they're not very expressive. And sometimes the characters, or the human characters, look like a cross between the characters in My Sims, which is a very old DS game, and the human characters in The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. So that's something I noticed, and it's kind of a little bit, I don't know, it makes the humans feel kind of plastic, I guess is probably the best way to call them. In terms of gameplay, it feels a lot like Pokemon, to the extent that most of the mechanics and animations feel like they're straight from Pokemon. You enter a battle, and it, like, the grass parts, like, sort of paves the way, or the rocks sort of are animated, and it just sort of has that transition that I think was introduced in Pokemon X and Y, and it just reminds me a lot of that, but there's only so different you can make two games of the similar genre. However, despite the art style and graphics being different, it just feels so much just like a Pokemon fan game, and they just needed to call it something different for legal reasons, so it's legally distinct. So it just feels like one of those fan games of Pokemon that you would download for free. So instead of gyms, you have dojos. Instead of Pokemon centers, you have the Temporium. EVs and IVs are in the game, which that's definitely something that people were like, oh yes, I hope they add this feature from Pokemon. I didn't. I don't know why they had to, but they did. And I guess because they can have a competitive scene. But they're just, yeah, they exist, but they're called different things. And at the start of the game, a professor introduced himself and lets you choose from 3 starter Temtem. From the start, it just feels exactly like Pokemon, except for the customization aspect, which is something I really do enjoy. Pokemon, you're just like, are you boy, are you girl? And you don't really choose too much about what you look like. In the more recent Pokemon games, you can choose, and there's a bit more customization, but the customization in Temtem felt a lot more, which I'm a big fan of, because I love customization, and especially in MMORPGs, so they can be a little bit different. They're just not all the same character running around. It does also remind me of an older Pokemon fan game, which was online. I think it was called, like... No, it wasn't Pokemon Showdown, but I had, like... It was online, but you can only be, like, certain... It was pretty cool, but it was, like, 15 years ago. I don't even know if it's still running, but it was very cool 15 years ago. So, Temtem even has its own Team Rocket character division called Can Balsato, and they even look like rocket grunts. Except they have a lot less emotion, they don't really necessarily look evil. I did read a spoiler when I was trying to just make sure that I was getting the name right, when I was writing my notes for this, and I just saw a spoiler and I was like, oh okay, that makes sense. But overall, they're just Team Rocket clone. It looks too much just like you're playing a Pokemon game, especially a Generation 1 Pokemon fan game. The only unique feature that this game has, other than the MMORPG aspect, is the fact that instead of PP for each move, each Temtem, almost said Pokemon, has a stamina bar which exhausts as you use different skills and replenishes at the end of every fight. And if you use a spell but you don't have enough stamina for that Temtem to cast that spell, the rest of it comes from the health. So that's an interesting aspect, but it does get annoying very quickly. It's just another aspect that you have to look at, but at least it's something unique. It's something that Pokemon doesn't have. Pokemon has PP for each move, rather than a stamina bar for each Pokemon. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad that Temtem did something different there with the stamina bar for the Temtems. Something else that I noticed that is just different from all RPGs in general is that when your Temtem levels up, it doesn't replenish the health as it does with most RPGs when you level up, because it increases your health. It at least gives you some boost in health, or it fully recovers you like it does in Pokemon. It's not the case in Temtem, which at least it's different, but it's something that I wish was there. It caught me out a few times, like, oh, I'm gonna level up, so I'll have enough health for this Temtem, but no, I didn't. It was just sad. So, despite the similarity to Pokemon, the Temtem characters themselves are mostly unique and can't be they don't have a Pokemon equivalent of the Temtem. They have different typing, but more or less the typing has an equivalent, but the designs themselves are mostly unique, except for a few Temtem characters. There's one that just, Barch just looks like a Pokemon. There's even a Joltik lookalike. A lot of the characters are unique, but there's just a few that just look exactly like existing Pokemon, especially in the case of Barch, who looks like the dancing bird one from one of the newer generations. I can't remember his name, but there's also a Toucanon lookalike called Tuali. So there's just a few that do look like existing Pokemon, but mostly they're completely unique. So that's what it's got going for it. It's got some unique Pokemon designs that aren't Pokemon, so that's cool. So big fan of that. And then another, again, I'm sorry, I'm comparing to Pokemon too much, but it is just so similar to Pokemon. So Pokemon games start fairly simple. They have you go up a very simple, path. There's some grass. It's got maybe one or two trainers that you have to fight, and it's just basically a straight line up to the next city. However, Temtem throws you straight away into complicated routes that you kind of get lost around for the first few times you're going through them, which should not be the case. It should be fairly straightforward. In Gold and Silver, it was just that way. In Red and Blue, it was just up. Mostly, it's just going in a one direction, learning that there are ledges, learning that there's grass, learning that Pokemon come out, learning that trainers will attack you, or rather challenge you to battle. However, this is not the case. It felt like it just threw me straight into the game, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it did feel like it just threw me straight away into the game. There was no, beginning period. I don't want to use the word hand-holdy, because I don't think Pokemon, especially the earlier games, were necessarily hand-holdy. They were just showing you the mechanics for the first, between one city and the second city. This one doesn't really do it. It does have tutorial pop-ups, which are different from Pokemon. Pokemon, shows you and teaches you by taking you to a battle and then showing you to throw Pokeballs. This one just has pop-up text, which is just a wall of text you have to read. So, depending on how you feel about that, that could be a bad or a good thing. So, we have trainers, but they're called tamers in this, which reminds me of Digimon. So we've got, but that's just a word that they couldn't use, because they couldn't use trainer, because that's Pokemon, so I don't mind them using tamer. It still makes sense. Also, Temtem tamer. It sounds right. So, I really didn't want to make this about comparing Temtem to Pokemon, since obviously games of the same genre will have similarities. I grew up loving both Pokemon and Digimon. I find that they don't have that many similarities, but I do understand when people compare the two, because they do both have Mon in the name, and they're both about monsters. There's a lot of differences, but there has to be some level of comparison. Sometimes Digimon did a game called Digimon World 2003, which had a lot of aspects that Pokemon had. You could have multiple Digimon. There were battles that you had to do that were sort of like gym leaders. They were called something different, can't remember, but it was great. But it still felt different enough in terms of the gameplay from Pokemon. It's the most in common with Pokemon that they've ever done, but it still felt fairly distinct from Pokemon. However, this game feels like Crema, who's the studio who did it, went to Game Freak and was like, hey, can I copy your homework? And Game Freak says, yeah, just change it up a little. But they didn't. It just feels too similar, rather than just the Digimon World 2003 aspect of, it's similar, but it's distinct enough for it to be, maybe you can compare a little bit, but it's not completely comparable. So I also noticed that this game, and this is something that a lot of people have noticed, and there's been a lot of controversy about this. So the game has a special Tamer Pass in addition to the daily freebies. However, you need to pay for the Tamer Pass. Where similar games that have battle passes tend to be free, this game, the digital version costs 100 Australian dollars, and the physical copy costs as much as, in some stores, Pokemon. In the store I got this from, this was $59, and the Switch copy was $59, the Xbox and the PlayStation copies were $69, and that's the same price that the shop is selling pre-orders for Pokemon for. It's the price of a full, a first-party AAA title game. It's an indie game, it should be indie game in price, and then it has a battle pass. That feels very strange. The devs have said that they're going to make everything you get from the battle pass able to be bought from the premium store later on. That also rubs me the wrong way. You shouldn't have a premium store if you cost, 60 Australian dollars to 100 Australian dollars. And then I bought the battle pass so I could talk about it on the video, but I noticed that it's also extremely hard to level up in the battle pass. You need 3,000 experience points to go from level 1 to level 2. Which, that seems a lot, but let's see what gives you experience points. Mostly post-game content, and each time you defeat a wild Temtem, you get 6 experience points. So, doing the maths there, 6 experience points, but you have to do it to get 3,000 experience points just for one level. And there are like 40 or 50 levels in the Battle Pass. And you only have a limited time to do it, which is like 80 days, I think, maybe less. So that's kind of weird. That feels like it's a little bit too hard. They have mentioned making it easier, but they said that they did that in the last update, which was just a few days ago, and it's still only 6 experience points. A lot of the stuff to level up is in the post-game, which, again, I know the game has been on early access for 2 years, but the Battle Pass is called, like, the launch release Battle Pass season, the pre-season. And it feels weird when you're doing like a launch thing to not make it accessible for players who are playing at launch. It's a new game on Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation. It's kind of weird that they haven't made it accessible. That's kind of annoying, but there's a lot of controversy about that. And then there's also the controversy that I'm playing on the Switch version, which is the version that I played, and it's just super, super, super glitchy. It has a lot of graphical bugs and crashes a lot. I found it to completely crash at least once an hour. I've been playing for probably just under, maybe between 10 and 20 hours actually, and I've got about 15 crashes so far. And the crashes are randomly before and after and during battles, which is annoying. But I also experienced a crash yesterday going into a shop. But there's also an annoying graphical bug that happens every time your Temtem evolves during a battle, and sometimes this means you don't even get to see your Temtem evolve. The devs are aware of this bug, but as of recording this, they haven't fixed it. So it's good they're aware of it, but it's really annoying that basically the whole display goes if you get an evolution, and it makes it really hard to pick a target in the fight, so that's kind of annoying. Especially because all fights are basically the dual fights from Pokemon. And then, again, this game just honestly feels like a legally distinct, free-to-play MMO games available on mobile that get called things like Pocket Monster Trainer or Digital Adventure. However, those are free and have premium content, while this one is not free and has premium content. It's kind of annoying. So if this game was priced as an indie title, like, 20 Australian dollars, maybe 30, like Ooblets or any other indie title, I would have been a lot more kinder on it because it's just an indie title. But if the game wants to be priced as a first-party title, then I have to grade it as such. And this is, at the moment, fairly broken, has premium content, does not make sense to be the price that it is. It should be either free or at least an indie price, and I would be a lot kinder on it. And again, it should not be the same price as the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet pre-orders. It just makes no sense for that. And there's also the fact that, yes, it is an online game, which means, yes, an internet connection is required. So you also need, if you're playing on Switch, PlayStation, or Xbox, a subscription that allows you to play online games. I hope it gets an offline mode soon, because honestly, I've played, as I said, maybe 10 to 20 hours. I only just got it, so Switch won't give me the total time played, but I haven't used any competitive aspects. I haven't played any co-op aspects. I haven't really played any online aspects other than seeing the other players run around the screen. There is also the case of the breeding center, which is just the daycare from Pokemon, but it's a really cool feature. It shows you all the other Temtem that are there in like the back area, and my gosh, does it lag. It lags so badly, the frame rate drops, which the frame rate drops a lot in this game actually. I have a pretty good internet connection, both my partner and I work in IT, so we kind of have to have a good internet connection. I host a website here. We need good internet. But the frame rate drops a lot, and then there's just this breeding area where it's really cool. You get to see the other Temtems that are there. However, it just lags so badly. Every time I'm there, I'm just like, I have to leave. Like, it's just not fun. So overall, actually, I am enjoying this game. I am having fun with this game. I do like it. I do like the genre. I'm sure once the bugs get fixed, it'll be even more enjoyable when I just don't go, oh gosh, it crashed. At least because it's online, there's an autosave. You don't lose any progress every time it crashes, which is a benefit, I guess. Also, side note, there's no way to exit out of the game other than just closing the game, which is also kind of annoying. There should be like a log out option. I don't know. Yeah, overall, I am enjoying this game. However, it's definitely not worth the price they're charging for it. So should you buy it? No. At least not in its current state. It needs to be updated and fixed with all those bugs. And it needs to be cheaper. It needs to be a lot cheaper, especially because it offers premium content. I understand that it is like, a lot of effort and time goes into games. However, other indie titles are able to not have bugs on release and also charge indie title prices, not the price of a first-party game. So if you are wanting to buy this game, I would very strongly suggest holding off, at least until all the bugs are fixed, and at least until there's a bit of a price drop. It is not, even though I paid the cheapest I could find it for, which was $59 Australian. I live in Australia, games are just more expensive here, we've got GST, there's the Australian dollar, that's just the price of it. But in general, I would want I would expect to pay like maybe $30. Like, it's definitely a pretty good indie game. And it should be maybe on the higher end of the indie game prices, but it doesn't need to be a first-party price because it's not a first-party title. So in general, should you buy it? No. Or at least not at the moment. Give it 6 months to a year. Follow them on Twitter. They're pretty active with talking about bugs and stuff. I'd check out their Twitter to see when things are being fixed. Check out when it's on sale. I would assume that with Christmas in a few months, it's at least going to have some sort of price drop just for the holidays. So have it on your watch list, but don't pay full price for it. At least not now. Maybe if they fix everything and maybe if they remove the premium content, sure, pay full price, but for the moment, no, it is not worth it. I'm enjoying it. It is good. However, I'm grading it as the first party price that it wants, which, no, it's not good in that context. But in any case, those are my thoughts on Temtem. If you want to see my first impression stream, I do have the VOD on this channel, so check that out. And of course, you can check out my Twitch for any other gaming content. Let me know in the comments if you've played this game or what your thoughts are. Like this video because you feel sorry for me because I bought the Battle Pass so I could talk about it. And of course, subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye!